What is it has to be jazz, and what pretty much started the project was it was a question. So the question was, is the youth ready to take over the jazz legacy? And from that question, it has to be jazz has become a project where our main focus is to bring people together to experience the feeling of jazz. That's what it has to be jazz is as a project. And what we do as a project is we work with a lot of young, talented jazz musicians where we would record albums, we'd write books, we've published a documentary, we've done a few things. So yeah, that's what it has to be jazz is as a project. In a nutshell. Why does it seem like there's a disconnect between the youth and jazz? Well, when it comes to it has to be jazz, we actually believe the opposite of that, because the amount of youth that we work with and the majority of the audience that attend the shows that we have hosted, the majority of them is youth. And based on the research that we have done in terms of the artists that we work with, like the artists that we know and the artists that they know, they're in excess of 3,000. And if each one of those artists performs, they have a following. So if we do like a bare minimum of, let's say, 10 people per show for each one of these artists, we're already in excess of 30,000 people. And these are youth-based people. And these are like minimal, very minimal numbers. So imagine if you did go to every one of these shows, how many people will be a part of this. And then when you go further into that, you must remember it's not limited to South Africa, because a lot of young jazz musicians, especially the ones that we've worked with, have traveled overseas. So then they have a following overseas. So then that 10 now becomes, for example, 100, because as you know, a lot of African music is sometimes more popular overseas than it is within our own country. So we go past the 10, we go past the 100, and the number, we are yet to calculate it, but that's why we say we believe in the opposite. The youth is actually into jazz, and there's a lot of youth that are involved with jazz. Yeah.
Maybe just to add another angle, which is obviously the most crucial one. We've recorded a total of 30 artists. Each one of the 30, they have either played or they have been exposed to a minimum of 1,000 artists, which basically means you find a bass player who has played with approximately 1,000 artists. That basically, if you actually expand it, there is quite a bit of number of these guys that tour overseas, and obviously the kind of attendance that you get overseas and get to play with other new artists overseas, that can easily translate into millions. And therefore for us, based on the kind of exponential growth and personal experience from the base of the 30 that we've worked with, of course we are continuing to discover new people. In the recent month we discovered a total of 20 amazing artists, which is where we actually draw from. So in our opinion, if you're looking at the early ages, like your 1939 Blue Note, we are exactly where they were in 1939, but now. And of course, taking into consideration what comes out of jazz colleges. Your typical Tandintuli, you know, your typical Dutuzo Makatini, you've got your Lindas Kakani, who is currently overseas in New York, who actually has his own little thing going there. So we have been encouraged to, we are encouraged by the fact that a lot of these people actually represent quite well, especially in Europe, largely in Europe, and most of the ones that we've dealt with are currently in New York. So there is beyond hope. We don't want to call that there is hope, but there is beyond hope. And of course, the way people interpret jazz these days, the way youth interprets jazz these days is totally different from the way it was interpreted before. I think in terms of legacy, first legacy, you are assuming that something has been constructed to its fullest potential. And therefore there is a generation after it. And therefore the idea is actually handing over that. We come from a very wealthy legacy. If you take into consideration Abu Babu Jonas Gwangwa, if you take your Abdullah Ibrahim, your Kipi Makesis, your Mangungus, etc., etc. And if you take those into consideration and then take into account the fact that the universities are actually looking closer into that. There's a lady from Eastern Cape who has done her thesis on Miriam Makeba. And that basically means that it's a continuation of where that has been. And the fact that Department of Arts and Culture has come up with the Living Legends program, it means they are closer to the finish line than the youth is. And the fact that some of these guys are actually playing with some of the youth that we've done work with. I'll give you a typical example. Jonas Kwangwa, Dr. Jonas Kwangwa's bass player, Bongani Mncube, is actually like the key person in that space. And he has done extensive work with us. He's actually the first guy to record with us, our very first CD. So the idea is that if that project is taken one step further, then those legends have in their midst the youth that fully appreciate and understand what they're doing. And therefore, touch wood, nothing happens at this point in time. If they should be called yonder, there will be someone who fully understands what that space is all about and carry the baton forward. Yeah.
We don't find jazz to be superior, or jazz is a way of life for us. For me personally, it's taught me a lot of life lessons in terms of my behavior, in terms of being patient and all that type of stuff. So jazz is one of those things, it makes sense for us. And jazz has always been in our lives. I've been listening to jazz long before I was born, somehow, some way, you know. So it was one of those things that it was a continuation. And to show that we're not against any other genres, at one point I used to DJ. And I was DJing R&B, hip-hop, EDM, but that was to get me through university. So luckily that worked out, and I was able to pay my school fees. But once that was finished, jazz called me back. And it's something that makes sense to both of us. It's something that we understand. It's something that we appreciate. And it's something that we feel that everyone should at least have the honor, or should I say, be allowed to experience the feeling of jazz. Hence, it has to be jazz, always having these events and making sure that, you know what, if you don't understand what jazz is, just come to the show. Like, you don't have to, just come experience it and just see what we're talking about and have that feeling. And then understand why it has to be jazz is what it is. I think in that sense of collaboration, it'll be the artist's decision to make. It's one of those things, because if we look back in history, like Tupac, he used to sample a lot of jazz stuff with Biggie and all the big rappers. So jazz has always been a ground for rooting off into other genres. So when it comes to us, I guess it has to be jazz. It's safe to say that we are trying to bring people back to that foundation, because going back to basics is always best when it's time to branch off into new things. So if you go back to, okay, this is the root of things, let's relearn over here. And then once they relearn, because some of the musicians that we do work with do branch us off into other genres, and they do enjoy playing other music. So for us, as it has to be jazz, it has to be jazz. And then the artists for themselves, we don't restrict people. We're about their growth. So if them growing means that they're going to another genre, then we are going to wish them all the best, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure that the transition is the best that it can be.
I think one of the crucial things that you need to appreciate is that there is an all-encompassing effort that goes into the final product that you listen to. We'll give you a simple example in terms of looking at the entire value chain. We need to identify an artist, or rather a composer in our case. And once we've identified a composer, they need to go to the studio. It means a sound engineer is required. It means the studio premises themselves are required. We have to commission a sleeve design, graphics designer or artist. In our case, we commission artists. And then if those composers come under our umbrella, there has to be an existing contract to clearly demonstrate what the relationship is. Then the lawyer situation comes in. And then obviously we need to be paying an accountant comes in. So that's how it all bonds this whole thing together. So it's not like a situation where I'm coming up as a jazz composer and I'm going to do my bit and go away. One of the many conditions that we actually put in place is that you can be the single most amazing jazz composer, but if you are not going to be, for example, registering with Sambro in order to get royalties from what you're recording, then you can't be part of this project. Because remember that one of the key things is taking care of existing issues within the industry. So it's a requirement for us. It's engraved, actually, it's cast in stone in terms of our contracts that you will be a member of Sambro and you will follow up on your royalties, etc., etc. So that's how it all puts this. That's how it puts this whole thing together, and that is why we basically saying we stretch as far as we can possibly can. The other thing that is also critical, which forms part of It Has to Be Jazz, is the fact that as with unearthed talent, obviously someone is going to write about that artist, and therefore scripting becomes crucial. Here's how it has become important. We have an initiative, it's called Know Your Change, but basically all it's really about is that you discover yourself and you discover what you want to do out of life. One of the ladies we discovered during one of those sessions, it was like, can I read something from my phone for you? Said, no, we don't want you to read it. Why is it on your phone, not in the public space? Because that's where it belongs. Long story short, she now runs her newspaper column. She scripts for our books, because part of what we need to do also is documenting the history of jazz effectively from 2016. And the reason it's crucial for us is because there's very little that's known about the past. And therefore we had to have a cutoff point. We are reviewing jazz. We are running a newspaper column on a weekly basis, but we also publish annually what we review for that particular year. We currently have in circulation 2016, a collection of jazz reviews, and 2017. Those are unique records in the sense that it's first-hand information. We were there. We are documenting facts as they unfold. That's the crucial part. The second crucial part is the fact that, as you can see, we take camera with us everywhere. We never know where action is going to be. We've got a book that we also publish annually. It's called Captured Moments. The reason it's captured moment, you know, when he goes into the zone and, you know, yeah, those are the sort of pictures that go into that pictorial book, because there's no point in you writing about it and someone can actually visualize what it is that you're talking about. The book is actually a supplement of what collection of jazz reviews is really all about. So that's how it's bolted together, and that is why for us we deliver it as a complete package rather than, you know, we have to now hand over to somebody else for finance and then graphics design. No. When we come up with the final product, it's the final product. The second aspect that is also important that people need to understand is the fact that this is an international project, for the simple reason that we've actually recorded collaborations between Botswana and South Africa, Zimbabwe, Malawi, DRC. We've had people from as far as Ghana grace our stage. But the most recent, which is actually what really confirmed our international status, is when we collaborated with an artist from Argentina. And that album is called Crossing Oceans. So that's where the relationship is. And when we actually do define to people that it is an international project, it has to be understood in that context.
Is jazz in the right hands and leading to the right place? Yes, like he just said, 10,000%, because the albums that we've recorded, the way they just come together, the way people are supporting It Has to Be Jazz, we are truly grateful for that. And it's easier to say that the vision that we have, it's easy to bring people in because they're starting to understand it more. When I explain to people what It Has to Be Jazz is about, like I mentioned before, bringing people together to experience the feeling of jazz, we actually have a vision for 2020. We want to get 10,000 people together. So if you are a jazz person, you have your song, and let's use an example of a solo. If a solo comes on, it does something to you. Like, there's no specific words that we can use, but it does something to you. Now imagine feeling that feeling with 10,000 people around you, just penetrating through everybody in that vibration. When you ask that question, it's like, yes, 10,000, yes. It's going in the right direction. And with the way we have structured things, we just hope that it just keeps building and building and building and reaching that level where the 10,000 in 2020 is literally just the start. Yes, we are working towards it, but it's the start of something even bigger. So the type of events that It Has to Be Jazz has, the ones we've been having lately, like on November 3rd, we had 4 live bands, and then that was an experience on another level. So the feedback before the event was overwhelming, because originally we were supposed to have it on the 27th of October. But when we put the poster out, there's so many people that came back to us. We're like, oh no, we actually have to go to a bigger venue. So we ended up at Soweto Theatre, the Red Theatre, and it was about 436 seats. And before the event, we were just pushing to make sure that, okay, everyone knows. So we literally knocked on every door. We got interviews wherever we could. We were interviewed on Kaya FM as well, thankfully, on the Art of Sundays with Vanessa Sani. So we were very thankful for that type of stuff. It showed us that the events that we want to have was leading in the right direction. So because of that, now we are aiming for quarterly events, because after recording the albums, we want to make sure that it's a full process. So once you record with us, you go to the stage. Once you go to the stage, we interview you, we do the whole marketing spiel when it comes to that type of stuff, because we make sure that we have videos of you, because we want to create a digital CV for the artists that we work with. Because we notice a lot of these artists, they like always running around, oh man, I have to get a YouTube link, I have to. Whereas when you come to It Has to Be Jazz, we'll do that stuff for you. We'll put your name there. We'll show them your best solos as per se. We'll show them, okay, this is where he's been. Because like he mentioned before, one of the criteria is we give you a form to fill out. So we know where you've been. We know who you've worked with. We know to an extent what your goals are. So that also as we are growing as It Has to Be Jazz, we are also growing in a sense with the artists that we're working with. And we want to create a final project where if you come to It Has to Be Jazz and you worked with It Has to Be Jazz, once you have left It Has to Be Jazz, you come out 100 times better. And people will know that, no, this one has been with It Has to Be Jazz. We can trust it. And you just tick that box and we just keep it moving.
Same yardstick as Blue Note.
Same yardstick as Blue Note. So yeah, so to answer the question, we want to have it quarterly. And depending on how the friction goes as we are building, we're either going to get bigger or more intimate and more frequent. But the goal is to go bigger. So our thought on the curation of the Jazz Festival. We attend a lot of these jazz festivals. And the one thing that's important that It Has to Be Jazz is the research that we do. Because at the end of the day, without jazz people, there is no It Has to Be Jazz. So we are always listening to what people say. So when it comes to other festivals, I can't speak. I wasn't a part of those festivals. I wasn't part of those organizations. I wasn't part of that. But as for It Has to Be Jazz, one thing that we are very critical on and very, we sit on it, is always listening to people and what they say. We've actually sent out surveys to ask people, okay, when it comes to a jazz festival, what do you expect? Okay, what feeling do you expect to see? Okay, what feedback do you expect in terms of the stage? What artists do you want to see? Do you want new stuff? Do you want old stuff? Do you want a combination of both? We listen to people when they say that. Like our clothing line, for example, it started as this, it switched to this because we were listening to people. They're like, no, we want something more detailed. Embroidery is a nicer product, it lasts longer. So we listen to that type of stuff. So when it comes to festivals, I know It Has to Be Jazz is going to work because we've listened to the people and what they want. And we are a firm believer, we just need to keep giving them what they want in order for the project to succeed. To answer your question in a nutshell, there can be a jazz festival. They can be, and it can be very successful. And in terms of intimacy, there's time and place. With It Has to Be Jazz, we're trying to acclimatize to both scenarios. That's why I mentioned before, we can either have more intimate, frequent events or spread them apart and have larger events. So the more intimate ones will have maybe, let's say, 120 people. Then they come to a room like this, and then you just sit there, and then you're with the artist. Whereas if you have a festival type of thing, then obviously it's outdoor, but It Has to Be Jazz.
Maybe just to add to that, I think the crucial part is that it would be not only absurd, but also ridiculous. We're called It Has to Be Jazz, and you have
another, yeah.
I mean, for us, that's totally ridiculous. Not that we have anything personal against any other genres. As a matter of fact, I collect anything and everything because I'm a strong believer in the fact that music is music. Remember that the genre, based on the history that we have researched, came about because of the recording and the sales industry. Music was music, and you just had to listen to what takes with you. And when genres came into being, a lot of what used to exist pre the genre generation was a whole sort of mixture. We can give you a simple example. Typical example, if you look at Motown, a lot of people don't actually know for a fact that a lot of music that came out of Motown was actually played by jazz artists. And it was played by a group called the Funkadelics. The Funkadelics go do something with Stevie Wonder or Marvin Gaye or whatever. As soon as they leave, they go and play with Miles Davis. For them, it was about creating the beats because remember, that was pre-beat time. So as far as we are concerned, we are strictly a jazz outfit. And what we push throughout, whether through marketing, whether through books, whatever it is that we push out there, we're talking pure jazz, and that's it. And we do not raise expectations in other areas, like no, Zwagala, you'll find Mafigizolo or something like that. No, we're not into that. We're not into that kind of thing because everybody else who's supporting us at this particular point in time, they are pure jazz purists, if I may call it something like that. They are what they are. If you look at your Mamelodi jazz clubs, social jazz clubs, those are the guys who will rent a hall, and there's like about 3,000 of them in that hall per quarter. There are guys we regularly visit. We have a session with them on the 27th in Heidelberg. And when those guys go in there, they've got themes, jazz themes, black and white, Flosham shoes, etc., etc. So that is our target market. We have listened to that kind of group, and we hear what they're saying. And of course, their support so far has been really outstanding. And I think the other thing that's also critical, jazz is not about numbers. You know, you can have 10 people who truly appreciate what you're playing and call a whole band for 10 people. That's what jazz is all about. It's really not about numbers. It's not about filling up a stadium. But obviously, you can go beyond intimacy. The likes of Herbie Hancock have attracted stadiums with 40, 50, 60,000. There's nothing wrong with that. But you just have to be in the jazz space to fully appreciate that. And of course, everybody else gets to zone in into that. Of course, that feeling you can't describe. But the beauty with it, like one of my friends mentioned, is that when a solo goes up and then it evokes those emotions in you, the beauty with it is that when you look at your colleague and he's in the same zone, you don't need words to explain that. What you're feeling, it's exactly what he's feeling, and you don't have to define it.
So the artists that we've worked with in the past 2 years, there's a whole array of them. So let me mention the albums that we've recorded. So there's been a total of 10 albums that we've recorded thus far. Each album that we name, it has to be jazz and then the name of the album. And the reason for that being is it's named after what happened in that moment. So the first album, it has to be jazz, Spontaneous Combustion. We called it that because it happened in 3 days. So after asking the first question, as mentioned before, is the youth ready to take over the jazz legacy? Within 3 days, we recorded that album. We got everyone together, so Spontaneous Combustion. That was Bongani Nkosinati Ncube, Nkosinati Matunjwa, Lungile Kunen. That was the first album. Second album, we commissioned Malcolm Gianni for Horn of Africa. He blows the horn. We're in Africa. Yeah, 1 + 1 is 2. And then so it was Malcolm Gianni, Kihorogile Makhatla, Ayanda Zelegile. Then we go to The Exchange. We featured the same guys from Spontaneous Combustion again because it was still early days. We didn't have such a wide range of artists in our stable. Then that was The Exchange because we featured an artist from Botswana for the first time. So that's when we went international. We were exchanging artists. Then we went to Words Unspoken. We featured a poet. And then that was the album we recorded in Das Kakan. With Malcolm Gianni and also Ayanda Zelegil. And then we went to Playground, where we featured artists from Botswana. Then we called it playground
Maybe.
because
Yeah.
we called it playground because they were so young, 18 and 19. So it was like they were just playing around. Okay, it has to be just playground. They're just having fun. And then the 6th album was called Mother Tongue. That was the first album we featured all-female band. So it was a bassist, Spongile Buddha from Kafka, Mamelodi. It was Sanki, then Kudzai from Zimbabwe, and Petil. And then we went to the 7th album, which was, yeah, there's so many of them. It was Worlds Apart, Worlds Apart. We called it Worlds Apart because we featured
A Malawian
bassist, Clyde Chisali. And he was in touch with, we put him together with Tiamo, Vincent
and
Tebogo Kaunda, yeah. And then called it Worlds Apart because they're so far from each other, but they still came together. Then we had Full Circle. At that point, we felt the project was coming together. Like okay, guys, this is the 8th album. I think possibly we know what we're doing. So that was the Full Circle. So that one we featured Musa Wenkosi, Tami Mahlangu, Sibusiso Ngirongo, and Joe Lembo. Joe Lembo is from the DRC. So it goes back to what we were saying in terms of international project. And the most recent one, that was Crossing Oceans. And as he explained before, we crossed over oceans where we featured Manu Sija from Argentina. And he was also put together with an artist from Duduza, Naledi Mampuru. Saxophonist was Mdum Kumalo. And then the drummer was Sibusiso Ngirongo. So yeah, those are the artists that we've worked with, and those are the albums that we've recorded. And I would like to add on top of that, that these artists, we do not call them up and coming.
They've been around the block a couple of times.
Yes, and we call them young professionals, and all we are doing is we are thankful that we are part of their journey, and we are thankful for them allowing us to help them on to the next step. So the people that we go to make sure that we capture everything perfectly, Byron Erasmus, he runs a studio in Pretoria. He is our go-to person when it comes to recording because, in my humble opinion, he is the best recording engineer I have ever worked with. He has a wealth of knowledge. He's worked with every type of genre. He's worked with overseas acts. He's worked with big names in the industry today in South Africa. So when it comes to his experience and his know-how, he's my go-to person. When it comes to the post-production, I do that myself. So I do the mixing and mastering myself because I do have a diploma in sound engineering. So one of the things that was important, obviously it's just us two running, it has to be jazz. And we're not the richest people yet, so we had to make do where we can. We utilize our skills as much as possible where we can. We had to learn a lot of things. Like, for instance, the way we got this camera. One person quoted us 20,000 Rand for 5 minutes. And I was like, YouTube is my best friend. YouTube is my best friend. So it was one of those things. Luckily, one of my friends had a camera and he was selling it. And at that point, fortunately enough, we just had enough to get the camera, and it was like ridiculously cheap compared to what the actual market value of that camera is. And literally, I woke up at 6 a.m. and I went to bed at 11 p.m. The only time I stopped was to use the bathroom or to have something to eat. But I taught myself how to edit videos and all that type of stuff. So yeah, when it comes to quality, quality is everything to us. Everything to us. So that's why I trust Byron with that. In terms of graphic design, it's Kuma Manoto.
Yeah, Kuma Manoto. We actually commission artists for
series. And also Leana Mohobi. They've designed our album covers, and the reason why we picked them because also their experience. So Kumo has designed, he's more in the fashion world, like designing clothes and stuff. So some of his pieces have been featured on Ellen DeGeneres. So when I was like, can you design this stuff? I was asking him on purpose because I knew the work he was able. Leana Mohobi as well, like,
he's been a brand manager almost half his life.
Half his life.
Like almost 25 years.
So in terms of graphic design, like, he's actually the one who designed this logo. So we make sure that the people that we work with, we do our best to make sure that they are the best in their field. And once again, we are very appreciative to make sure that, you know, we are part of their journey as much as they are part of ours.
Maybe just to add one very significant fact in terms of the recordings. This is one thing that normally surprises a lot of people. As we go around, we pick and choose the cream of the crop. It can be a drum, it can be a bassist, keyboard, any instrument you can think of. And then when we sit down to conceptualize a project, what it should be, like Horn of Africa, spontaneous combustion, we already have in mind what we believe will match in terms of these composers. So literally, the majority of them meet at the studio for the very first time, like I'm sorry, so I play bass. So nobody knows each other. And then when they get to the studio, there is basically 3 rules. The first rule, because there's no score, there's nothing to work with. The first rule is that if it feels good, it fits, you play it. We don't care what it is. You know, there's no, the level of creative freedom that they go with is 100%. That's the first rule. The second rule is that it has to be jazz. You can play it, we don't care what it is, but it has to be jazz.
Hence the name.
But because we actually met these people in a jazz environment, they've got the same definition of what it has to be jazz is. And therefore they will go ahead and play within that. And then the single most important rule above all rules, be yourself and have fun,
Just have fun
while you do it. So as soon as they walk into the studio, we press record. An hour later, we stop. Whatever happened, happened. And then it's time then for them, they have the freedom to name each track. But the idea for us, like when you listen to every single CD that we've recorded, it's an hour in a moment in time. That's how they felt. It was imperative for us that they stick to that 1 hour, because remember that if you record over days, for example, these are youth, they come out, something horrible has happened. They come back, the mood is no longer the same. So we needed to be sure that we block one specific moment. How did they all feel at that particular point in time? Ridiculous as it might sound, risking being fired by my boss here, I often say to people, we don't record CDs. You want a CD, please just go to a CD shop and buy one. We record a soul of an artist. And if that's what you're looking for, then that's what we supply, a soul of an artist. You know, when that guy goes in there and instead of using a stick and uses brushes, what is he pouring through that brush into a cymbal, for example, into a bass bin? What exactly is it that is happening at that point? Because once you take that song and play it for someone you like, because after we record, we also research further. We ask for opinion. We know that there are those connoisseurs in the market. You send him a track and you're like, just share your thoughts on this. A lot of what comes back, when am I getting my copy? Then we know our job is done. Jazz has got subgenres, and the interpretation of those subgenres are dependent entirely, 1, time and place, 2, the feeling at the time when you play. Because remember that the genres and subgenres are just something that came up from the market. If you said to me, what does Richard Bonner play? I don't know. But I know it's amazing. I can't put it in a category. But this is the same person who have played with Joe Sample. And they've played proper jazz. This is a person who has played with Sadar Watanabe. This is the person who has played with the cream of the crop in jazz. He has played with Marcus Melvin. He has done all sorts of things with everybody. I don't know what it is that he plays, but what I know for a fact, it's amazing. And for me, the same signature that he uses with every jazz artist is the same signature he uses when he plays West African music. And therefore you can put that into it. One of the amazing examples is that when we put together Worlds Apart, we brought in this guy from Malawi because we were looking for a rumba touch. You know how they play bass? We were looking for that feel, and that feel fits in jazz. That's the bottom line. And for us, you know, it has to sound like that. It has to sound that good. And it has to be within the confines of what we've come to understand as jazz. It can start as something real funky and then go straight into walking bass lines. And everybody else knows walking bass lines originate from jazz. So it can start as one thing, progress to another, step down to something else.